All right, ladies, we are going to be talking about niches and communities today. So, this one is going to be an interesting concept when we talk about what a niche is, and you'll learn a little bit more of why certain species live where they do. So, a niche, what that does is it's every organism, and when we talk about it, it's every organism has a specific place it lives. So this species can live in an area because it has the perfect conditions to grow and reproduce. So specifically, a niche is going to define where a species lives, what it provides in the environment, and how it interacts in the environment. So if I asked you to think of where a lion might live, right away a lot of you would think, hopefully other than the zoo, is that a lion is going to live somewhere where it's hot, probably kind of like a safari type area. You think of the Lion King, you think of jungly area, you think of chasing down gazelle and other animals. Uh, that's its niche. Okay, that's where it belongs. It's its specific kind of life and how it lives it. So each species is going to have its own range um, for their environment to survive and reproduce. So essentially, what that means is, for example, we can look at environment. Okay, and when things like weather extends past what they are used to, they're going to experience stress. So each of you have a normal day-to-day life that you have. You go home, you do homework, you may go out and you might do sports. Well, if you start doing something new and add in something like, let's say you add a new sport in to your already busy schedule, that's going to extend past your range of what you're used to and you're going to get stressed. Well, animals go through stress as well. So beyond certain limits exist certain boundaries for species. But when you're in a good range, we call that a habitat or a general place a species lives. So we have another normal distribution bell-shaped curve, and we see that when we talk about the range of whatever environmental variable we're talking about, there's a good optimal range. That's where the average lives. And then we have a lower limit of tolerance, which is the light blue, the lighter blue, and then we have the upper limit of tolerance on the right. The very, very light, almost gray blue, that's going to show where the species is at extreme stress and will not live. So when we talk about the characteristic of a niche, we're going to see that it has many resources that a species may need. And this is going to include things like water, food, shelter. So the physical aspects of what the species needs is going to be included. So if they're amphibian, the environment is going to be moist. There's going to be water, there's going to be wetlands of some kind. So a niche is also going to include factors like when and how reproduction takes place, the food it eats, and the way the species gets its food. We can also look at certain factors that we call abiotic and biotic factors. And remember that every now and then in science, we like to throw A in front of stuff to mean the opposite. So biotic factors will be living factors. So that would be things like predators, food sources that are living or have been living. Um, that would be things like other living things like the grass that's growing, the trees that are growing around it. Abiotic factor is going to be the non living factors around it. This would be things like water, um, rocks, general terrain. Those are going to be the different types of abiotic factors that will come into play when you talk about niches. So then what happens when two or more species environments overlap? We're going to get competition. And this is going to be when two or more species are competing for the same resources to survive. So essentially, what's happening is that these two species are inhabiting the same niche at the exact same time. And according to the competitive exclusion principle, no two species can do that. Okay? So, what we're going to see happen if two species inhabit the same niche, one is going to win out and survive and outcompete. The other is going to lose and die out and go extinct. So if we look at this little graph on the competitive exclusion, what we can see is two different types of bacteria, and we see that they were grown together and they were grown alone. So if you look at the dotted lines for both first, you see that Aurelia, the red dotted line, had a pretty decent population size, and it maxed out right around, I'd say, about 8 days. Then we have Caudatum. The dotted line is light blue. It had much less, I'd say almost half of the population size that Aurelia had. That is being grown alone. When you put those two species together, they compete for the same resources. We see that both populations initially start growing, but around day 3 and 4, Caudatum is actually being outcompeted by Aurelia and actually dies out while Aurelia survives and reproduces and continues growing. But sometimes we don't always see that extreme case of outcompeting. Sometimes we see a division of resources so that many species can inhabit the same area. So this may mean that when you look at a tree, that you might find at the very bottom one certain type of beetle. But as you climb higher and higher into that tree, you may find other types of beetles. They're going to share the same resource, but they're just going to be in different locations on the tree and where they're located. So this is going to be a good example. We have a spruce tree here. And I would say up until about 7 meters, we see a light green color. That would represent population of beetles that live in that area. Then from that 7 meters probably to about 12 or 13 meters, we see that light or that yellow color. That'll represent a different population of beetles that live there. Now, they're both going to use the same resources, but they have distinguished where they live and set up boundaries. Okay? It'd be like the boundary of Kentucky and Indiana. We know where our boundaries are. We live in Kentucky, so we stay in Kentucky. Indiana, they live in Indiana, they stay in Indiana. But we do see some crossover, but they always go back home, right? Some people from Indiana come to Kentucky to work and vice versa, but they go home at the end of the day. And that's what you would see in a spruce tree as well, like this. You'd see beetles that sometimes may go past the threshold of where they're living, but they're always going to go back to where their home is. So now we have an interesting couple of things, especially with keystone species, but we'll talk about predation first, and this is going to be where one animal is a predator, captures and eats another animal, or the prey. So predation, one animal is a predator, the other is the prey. As any animal would, you better hope you are the predator or else it won't be pretty. We have herbivory, which is where one animal is an herbivore and feeds on a producer or a plant. So vegetarians, they're herbivores. They like to eat plants that are producers. Most humans like both being the predator or eating some meat. And then we also like to be herbivores, where we eat a nice salad with our steak. So a keystone species is a little bit different of a concept, but it's one that's necessary for the survival of many others in a community. So a keystone, I'll make sure to draw this on the board. It refers to something an architect. And if you've ever seen an archway made out of stone, in the very middle, there's usually a little bit larger of a stone that helps hold it all together. If we were to take that one stone out, the archway would fall. So a keystone species is essentially that rock that holds everything together. If we get rid of that species, all others will start to die. So an example of this is going to be sea otters. Nice and cute little creatures, but sea otters living in a certain area eat urchins. Urchins eat kelp, and kelp house many different types of life. So if we kill out all the otters or all the otters die out, urchins are going to grow wild. Urchins are going to eat all the kelp until there's no more kelp. If there's no more kelp, the life inside the kelp will die. The urchins won't have any food, and the urchins will eventually die. So without the otters, there was a total and complete collapse of this ecosystem. And we're going to see keystone species play a crucial role in how things are set in the environment and out in the world. We also have this idea of symbiosis, and symbiosis is going to be any relationship in which two species live closely together. And there's going to be three types. There's mutualism, and mutualism is where both species are benefited from the relationship. There's parasitism, where one species benefits, the other is harmed. And communalism, where one organism benefits, the other is unaffected. So we're actually going to look at the three of these in class, in depth. You're going to be able to look up some different types of symbiosis and different relationships that we do have with other organisms in the world. Because right now, we have a mutualistic relationship with many different types of bacteria in our stomach. Some live there to help clean out our digestive system. That's beneficial to us, but they also benefit because they get to eat and survive in an environment. So we are literally housing many, many, many different types of bacteria inside of us right now. So we are going to look at more examples of different types of symbiosis. So make sure you write down any questions that you have. Email me if you have any questions. If something's not working, please let me know. I can't fix it if I don't know. I know last video there was an issue with some of the sound coming out on some of the slides. So if that happens, just make sure that you are reading and keeping up, and I will make sure that you are completely caught up when you come to class. The secret word for today is going to be coat, as in what you wear during the winter, a coat. Okay, so make sure you get that secret word in. Please make sure you're watching these videos and not just fast forwarding to this part. And I will see you in class either Tuesday or Wednesday. Have a great day.